Hi everyone, Happy New Year and welcome back to Macro Meets Business Insights from Wharton and Beyond. I'm your host, Diego Ordonez, the Economic Analysis Chair here at Penn IBEC. Today we'll be discussing Venezuela, what went wrong in the early 2000s, the events that took place on the first days of 2026, and the nation's path to economic and political recovery. In this episode, we'll be speaking with Angel Alvarado, a Venezuelan economist, congressman, and founder of the Venezuelan Finance Observatory, who is now working as a postdoctoral fellow here at Penn. Hi everyone, so I'm joined by Angel Alvarado. He got his bachelor's in economics and his PhD in economics, both from the Universidad Católica Andrés Bello in Caracas, Venezuela. Then he moved on to work in politics. He was the Secretary of Community Affairs, the Chief of Staff, and the Secretary of Public Safety, all for the Sucre municipality in Caracas, where he helped reduce homicides by 42.5%. And then he was elected to the Fourth National Assembly of Venezuela as a congressman. He's now working as a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Pennsylvania. Nice to have you, Angel.
Thank you, Diego. It's my pleasure.
Great. So to get started, for the listeners who haven't really followed what's happened, obviously in Venezuela lately, could you describe the country's economic situation?
Yeah, Venezuela is a collapse, economic collapse. Imagine an economy that lost 75% of the GDP. I mean, it's Germany over the World War II lost less than 40% of the GDP. The Great Depression in America in the 30s of the last century was about 29% of the GDP. Well, we are talking Venezuela is three times or two times the World War II. Okay, so we are talking about the destruction of the economy in a peace in a peacetime. So it's a destruction of 75% of the economy without conflict, without a civil war, without an armed conflict. It's a peacetime worst collapse of the humanity, at least that we recorded in history. That implies for the Venezuelans a hyperinflation that goes from 2017 to 2021. It's the longest hyperinflation recorded as well in history, probably just after Nicaraguan. I think was very close Venezuela Nicaragua, but Venezuelan was severe than the Nicaraguan one. So that meant for Venezuela, or means now to Venezuela, that 8 million Venezuela had to get out the country to find a job, to find a wage, to find a mean of living outside the country, some in the US, many in South America. We are talking about the 25% of the population out of the country in a period of 7 years. And that is a dramatic humanitarian situation. And well, that is a little bit a snapshot about the country in terms of economic and social situation now.
Great. Yeah, so Venezuela is often described as an oil-rich country. It has the largest oil reserves in the world. But for years, it actually hasn't traded oil normally. This is partially due to the beginning of communism under the Chavez regime. But what does this actually mean in practice? We
Yeah,
know that Venezuela's oil production fell approximately 80% from 3 million barrels a day to less than a million in recent times.
correct. That oil in Venezuela is the only game in town. Okay, has been in that way for the last 1 century. The economy have been trying to diversify the economy, other commodities, other sectors. It's a very difficult when you have that amount of oil, which is very profitable. And it's very difficult, the Dutch disease, that create many incentives to focus just in one product. So, but Chavez, after 1999, create more dependence on oil. He followed a practice of expropriations of the private industry and the private economy in Venezuela. He nationalized again the oil sector, and the state became more interventionist, more dependent of oil, more inefficient way of producing oil because it was the state with a small presence of the private sector, especially Americans and European companies. That politicized the oil industry. The most important company in Venezuela was PDVSA. PDVSA was like Saudi Aramco. PDVSA is the Petróleos de Venezuela, the national oil company. Saudi Aramco of Saudi Arabia and PDVSA was, head to head in the horse race, in which was the best company. So Chavismo politicized that. The manager, the CEO of the company became people close to the party, close to Chavez, not the best person in the country, at least the best person who can run a oil industry. And the production goes from 3.5 million at the beginning of the Chavez to 2 million, 2.5 million, 2.5 million. And Venezuela, and we had an important crisis, a shock, very important, in 2013, in which the price of oil drops by 50% in just a short period of time. And that happened many times in a country like Venezuela. In the 80s, happened in the 90s, you have a shock, an external shock, and well, you have a typical problem of balance of payments. But in this case, we have a reduction in P, which is the price of oil, and at the same time, a shock, a drop in Q in the production. So you know that the revenues of an economy like Venezuela is Q, the quantity of oil that you are exporting, and P. And you have a reduction in both factors at the same time. That created an important shock in the economy in 2014, 2015, and the production of oil collapsed in the country for the first time. Okay, was something unexpected, and well, mismanagement, politicization, uh, a lot of fragility, dependence of oil, the policy of expropriation, as you mentioned, socialism, corruption, and so on, create that collapse of the beginning of the collapse of the economy. And then we have the first term of Donald Trump, which was the maximum pressure policy against Venezuela and Iran as well, but in this case, Venezuela. Because Venezuela was destroying the democratic system. At that time, it was in Congress. And we were persecuted, violation of human rights, and the administration of Donald Trump decided to sanction the financial sector of Venezuela in 2017, and then in 2019, the oil industry. So there's a lot of debate, even in the literature, about what caused the collapse of Venezuelan economy. I think it's no discussion. It was Chavez and socialism and corruption, but the sanctions aggravated, make worse the situation. So at the end, you have like some economic estimation think that 50% of the 70% of the collapse of the economy is about mismanagement, socialism, another 50% is sanctions. We need to do more econometrics about that because some people say, well, we have to see more mechanism. But that's the picture a little bit of what happened in Venezuela and what's the situation of the economy and how the economy got to this terrible situation.
Great. And as you were working as a congressman back in, the mid 2010s, obviously you were seeing the height of this collapse. How did you see, the lives of everyday Venezuelans change? As you were walking in the streets, you said you worked in one of the most dangerous favelas in South America, where you lowered the homicide rate. So yeah, how did you see their
Yeah,
livelihoods change?
well, the story is like I was in academics before politics. I'm trying to have a career, PhD, whatever, And then the mayor asked me, well, why don't you help me with the homicides, statistics, econometric stuff? So I was trying to do something at that time. And I get involved, okay, I like this data. I start to design, strategies to reduce crime. Um, and then chief of staff, and then I was elected as a congressman. So I've been working 7 years in the favela with the mayor and 5 years in the favela as a congressman. Okay? That favela is an aggregation of 2,000 slums. Okay, one after another. That makes the biggest favela in South America. Um, if you live in favela one, you have problem with favela B, so the person of favela A don't go to the B, and the B don't go to the C. So nobody knows the whole favela. Everybody knows his sector. Okay, it's his own sector, not the whole favela. But because I was an outsider and I was working in the mapping and drawing and making statistics and stuff, I know the whole favela. Okay, so few people know the whole favela. I was one of them, and I was in Congress. I would love to be in the favela. It was like I was trying to change that reality. And one day came a lady with a baby in her arms, probably a baby of 2 months or 3 months. The baby was sick and she was begging for money or for food. Okay, and in one of my offices, the offices that the congressman has to receive people and talk about the problems and listening to the constituencies. Um, and the baby that weekend died. That baby didn't die because was sick. That baby died because was hungry, because that family didn't have food at home. And I remember I had with another the president of the city council. We have like what, the fundraising, the politicians. We have money for events, for that stuff. I think we had like $1,000, for the events of the rest of the year that happened like a September. Um, and I said, well, let's use the money of the office, your office and my office, money for politics. Let's use this. It was not a public money, okay? It was a money for doing politics. Let's do this for, let's create a soup kitchen in that slum, in that neighborhood where the baby died, to feed the kids of that sector, because the people is dying of starvation. It's a famine in some ways. So I post that online. I don't know, Instagram or Facebook, whatever, and receive a call from a friend say, "I have $1,000 for you. Start something for 30 more for kids," and so on, and many other people. And at some point, we were feeding about 5,000 kids every day. So that's a hyperinflation. That's a collapse of 75 of the GDP of the economy. Venezuela used to be the wealthy when Chavez became president in 1998, the wealthiest country in Latin America. It's like a Chile, sometimes Argentina, but we as a Venezuelan look to, wow, those guys in South America, poor people, those guys, Uh, in the 50s, when my parents born, Venezuela was the wealthy country after America and Switzerland. Okay, so imagine a country that used to be wealthy and suddenly the people is dying. The kids cannot walk because they're hungry. That kid is sick, cannot walk. No, it's not sick. The kid is not eating at all. And that is the problem. So that is the way it looks, a problem like this. So the head of the house, typically a man, decide to, hey, my family, I have to cross the border. I'm going to go walking, cross the border to Colombia and find a job there. And I send you some money to feed the family. Meanwhile, I hope to see you in 1, 2 years. Other people decide, no, Colombia is not good enough. I'm going to cross the border walking to Ecuador, to Peru, to Bolivia, to Chile, even Argentina, walking thousands of miles. That's a hyperinflation. That's a collapse of 75% of the economy. That was the humanitarian situation of Venezuela over that year. I think that's a picture that if someone is trying to imagine how was that, well, was in that way.
Right. Yeah. No, that's definitely a very impactful picture and vivid picture that you've just painted for us. I think one of the things that obviously in the U.S. we're privileged to not have to experience that. But a lot of us don't realize that, this happens all over the world. Venezuela is obviously a disproportionate example. But yeah, it's definitely a very, very impactful thing that I think a lot of us don't realize. But yeah, moving a little bit more towards the recent events. In the first few days of the year, actually, the U.S. Carried out a military operation and they captured President Nicolas Maduro. So how do you think that this would change the, Venezuelan political landscape? Obviously, we know that a lot of Maduro loyalists are still in power. So probably not that much of a difference, but how do you think it could pan out over the next, say, 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, that's a good question. We have three phases in this new Venezuelan process. The first one is stabilization. Last December, inflation, the monthly inflation of Venezuela was 30%, 33%, just in 1 month, okay, in 30 days. And the first week of the year, the inflation was 30% the first week. So Venezuela was about to start a new hyperinflation in the last, I would say, 40 days, right? Before the extraction of Nicolas Maduro. So when economists talk about stabilization, they're talking about, stabilize prices. Okay. You can say, well, stabilization is stabilize the economy to growth, to reduce inflation, to 2 digits, 1 digit, etc. That's the process of stabilization. And then the other thing is avoid violence, okay? That we don't have violence in the country, on the streets. And that is the process that we are now, okay? So we are about to, we have some days, 5 more days to have a month after the extraction of Maduro. So we, the first month has been a month for stabilization. The second phase that probably start next month or in 1 month should be the recovery, or probably already started recovery. So recovery means when you lost 75% of the GDP, okay, you have to do something, right? So the strategy of Venezuelan recovery is around oil. So you have to increase the production of oil. So the country is reducing the taxes to increase the investment for American companies, especially. Venezuela has been was became a hub for Cuba, Russia, China, Iran, uh, and that was a threat for Americans. And now Venezuela is trying to look to America, export oil to America. Venezuela has been typically a supply of oil of America since the World War One, um, and it's a strategic partnership because the kind of oil that the refineries of the Gulf of Mexico typically refine is the oil of Venezuela, heavy oil that you blend with the light or shale oil of the United States. Okay, it's like a cocktail. So the Venezuelan heavy, the American is very, very liquid, and then you create the gasoline. And the whole terminals and Citgo and refineries of the East Coast is Venezuelan infrastructure. Venezuela is still having now a island in the Delaware River between Delaware and Pennsylvania because historically Venezuela has been dealing with America, and that island used to be the Standard Oil of New Jersey, which is that became at some point Venezuelan property. So, I mean, that's a connection between Venezuela and the U.S. And the idea is the recovery occurs in that way, around oil, and then they are trying to dismantling the socialism, to reform all those controls, lack of property rights, lack of a rule of law, etc. Okay, and the third phase that we hope, I think it's about to start with the releasing political prisoners and the comeback of the exiles, which is the restoring of democracy. Okay, we don't want a Chinese model. We don't want a Saudi model. We are a democracy. Used to be a democracy. In 1973, we had just three democracies in Latin America: Venezuela, Colombia, and Costa Rica, and even just three democracies in Iberoamerica, because Portugal and Spain at that time were not democracies. So we have a long tradition of democracy, and the people of Venezuela is looking, okay, Trump, thank you so much. Let's stabilize the economy. Let's recover the economy, but we need democracy. And the thesis was what what's first, the egg of the chicken, right? Is it first democracy and then recover the economy? Or I think the idea was to recover economy and then to have a democracy. I think it's the right one because the situation was very bad and we need to show some results and stabilize the country because the Chavismo used to have control of paramilitary groups and groups, that were outside the law, a lot of arms and guns in the street. So I think it's the right solution. And that is the general picture of what's is happening now in Venezuela and what is the plan for the next for the rest of the year. I'm hoping that we will have a democracy anytime soon before the end of the year, or at least at the beginning of the next year.
Right. Yeah, you actually touched upon one of the points that I wanted to talk about there. How the Trump administration actually announced that, it would be taking charge of Venezuelan oil exports and help, kickstart that oil industry. And one of my concerns and questions for you is, what are the risks that this new influx of dollars from the oil sales sort of create an illusion of economic recovery?
Okay.
While the main issues remain. Like obviously, in Argentina, we've seen the $20 billion bailout is a massive influx of dollars. And essentially what that did was hold off
Yeah, yeah,
issues
yeah.
that were already there.
Yeah, that's a good point. The first thing is we need to, you have inflation when we are printing money without, reserve or printing money just because to finance the executive, right? Um, so we need a fiscal rule. So we have to have a balanced budget. That means that every bolivar that you print at the central bank have a dollar or a fraction or proportion of dollar to back that bolivars, right? At least to have some fiscal rule in the sense we have these revenues and we are gonna expend money in this sector. And that is what Marco Rui has been talking about, that every dollar that Venezuela will receive for the export of oil will go to Qatar for a bank account that was supervised of the Americans and then goes to the Venezuelan government because we don't want corruption as well. And then we have to prioritize, and at this moment is an interaction between the Donald Trump administration and the interim government of Venezuela at this moment of Delcy Rodriguez to see, okay, this goes to education, to health, to infrastructure, and so on, right? I don't see the risk of, of course, the corruption. But uh, look, if you send to Venezuela $1 is a lot. When you send $1 to Argentina, people are looking for more dollars, right? But Venezuela, $1 is a lot in this moment. I mean, we are talking about billions. It's a lot of money. But what is important to avoid a crisis to Argentina is to have a flexible exchange rate. Okay, you have exchange rate which is very cheap for Argentina and Venezuela. People are going to buy dollars. What you need is a exchange rate which is fair, which is a market process, that is flexible. At the same time, you need a fiscal deficit close to zero, or balanced budget. When you have that balanced budget and you have a fiscal rule, and you have a flexible exchange rate, typically you wouldn't might experience that kind of problems of balance of payment crisis and other stuff. And you can see the example of Chile, Peru, and Colombia. If you have a sound fiscal policy and sound monetary policy, you have a stability of price and you can grow on a decent rate. And is what Venezuela needs. I think Venezuela needs to grow by 2 digits for the next decade. I think, but what we're expecting is the oil production. The GDP in Venezuela is very easy, to calculate because it's just about oil. So if we are now, the production of oil is 1.2 millions of barrels, probably at the end of the year could be 1.5. 1.5 more or less the 50% of the historical one. If you said the historical one is 3 millions, right? And then from 1.5 to 2 millions, it probably takes like 2, 3 more years. I think 2 million is going to be okay to recover the economy. That would be probably at the end of the year. For that reason, I think the recovery phase could end at the end of the year. And then we have to work more to have 3 millions, I think gonna be possible because the law now is very attractive for foreign investment. And probably in 10 years, we have 3 millions. Okay. So it's not going to be 20 billions overnight, like IMF with Argentina. It's going to be money, but along 10 years. And the money should go to pay the police people, the nurses, the doctor, the teachers, And now the pension in Venezuela is $3, So my parents, with $3 cannot buy medicines or food, even cannot go to a park if paying the, $2.3 what SEPTA is fair in Philadelphia, or the metro in Philadelphia subway. So it's nothing. So the idea is that money that goes is as a consequence of the exports of oil goes to pensions and recover the consumption. The economy start to work again.
Right. Yeah, I think another one of my sort of concerns that I wanted to talk with you about, we obviously the main topic of this discussion has been oil, and we're talking about sort of oil being the backbone of Venezuela's future growth. But I think as we see, in the modern world, a lot of successful economies have based themselves off a service economy.
Mhm.
We've moved off oil. There's a lot more. We're in 2026. There's a lot more eco-friendly initiatives, net zero initiatives. So I wonder if you see, any risk in trying
Yeah.
to rejuvenate the economy with oil as its essential, like, its foundation.
Yeah, I think well, nobody knows when's would be the peak oil demand. Okay, so we are talking about peak oil demand in 1970, 1980, 1990, 2000. There is I think I wrote a paper about this. I think we did macro modeling, recovery of Venezuela. We model, this stuff that I'm talking, income and expenditures and fiscal debt, deficit, fiscal debt, and the whole thing, right? And it's a peak, probably a peak demand 2030. Uh, so we have to work in recovery production. We have to make it. We have to produce 3 million barrels per day. We need to, because gasoline, we need gasoline probably for probably many decades more, right? Even in the case that the world decide to have just electric vehicles, no gasoline, we're gonna need gasoline for airplanes, for instance, right? And even in that case, if you have a big demand and the reduction of demand, as economists study, you have a reduction of price, and just the people who have the lower marginal cost gonna be in the market. And those guys are Venezuela, Saudi, the OPEC. Okay, it's not gonna be America. So even in the case that the reduction, the production of oil dramatically, the few guys who have been producing oil for so long for the rest of the century will be the OPEC like Venezuela. But we need to recover revenues of the country and at the same time diversify the country to not depend just of oil. I've been working in the archive of Rockefeller family the last 2 years. Um, and they said in 1930s that the problem of Venezuela was the oil was the only way came in town. Okay, so it's so what I'm seeing. Well, we have to work on tourism. Venezuela was 1,000 kilometers of beaches, and shore, beautiful, we need to work, for instance, data centers. So if you use the oil and the gas, uh, it's cheap energy. So we have water. So why not? We can have a big data centers in Venezuela, service economy, tourism. So we have to jump. You make the point to the service sector. Industry is difficult. Industry is you don't need to go to industry. Probably you need to diversify a little bit through services and we need to become something that some technology we need to invest in education in universities to be more innovative. So we want Venezuela to become something like Estonia after the fall of communism, with they create Skype was a platform like this 10 years ago. Some sectors around energy but not just related to energy. And Venezuela has the capacity, not just oil, Venezuela has the seventh reserve of gas in the world. So Venezuela can supply Colombia, can supply the Caribbean with gas. So it's a challenge, of course. There is no recipe for this, but I think there are some opportunities in the hyperscale and the data centers and clouds and AI that I think is the way that we need to jump from a technology which is very old. The oil technology is a technology of the 100 years ago to the new technology with AI. We need to jump from that and try to connect the AI with energy and try to become a Venezuela other sources of revenues. The question will be that the oil industry and the data center don't create too many jobs. Okay, so it's capital intensive industry. So we need, like you mentioned, labor intense industry like tourism to attract people that don't want to be in Philadelphia with a 20 Fahrenheit and they can spend, in a Margarita Island sipping good rum the rest of the winter. And that would be, the kind of thing that Venezuela have to do. Today, American Airlines announced that they're going to fly to Venezuela again after 7 years. There is no direct flight from the US to Venezuela. So that kind of thing is important. We need to attract the Venezuelans, the diasporas, or millions to get back, and we need to attract nice people from Penn, for Harvard, go to Venezuela, work from there. We need to develop the country, not just Venezuelan. We need to invite people, Now, nobody wants migrants, but I think Venezuelan, we suffer a lot, discrimination everywhere. So we are happy to invite people, to go to Venezuela to rebuild the country. I think that's the kind of stuff that we have to do for the reconstruction of Venezuela.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I think you said it perfectly. Managed well in the next 10, 20 years, Venezuela could pretty easily recover and become one of the powers of South America. Thank you so much for your time, Angel. I really appreciate it. And surely we'll talk again once this whole situation develops further.
Thank you so much. I enjoy a lot to have this conversation with you.
Thanks so much. Venezuela's story reminds us that natural wealth is not the same as economic strength. Oil can bring short-term relief and even stability, but it can't replace trust, institutions, and credibility. The real challenge ahead for Venezuela isn't just pumping more barrels, it's rebuilding the rules that make recovery last. On another note, be sure to tune into Angel's podcast, Ceteris Paribus, a Spanish-speaking economics podcast where they cover political, economic, and social developments in Latin America. Thanks for tuning in. Happy 2026, and we'll catch you next month.